Okay, welcome to those who may be joining us from home. And especially pleasing this evening is to have more than just three of us here in council chambers as we continue to adapt back from our protocol for COVID-19. We've got a work session for the Poquoson City Council this evening. We have some guests here from Virginia Department of Transportation, affectionately known as VDOT. Appreciate them coming here this evening. They're going to give us a scope reduction alternative dealing with Creek Road construction and the bridge replacement. I guess we have three members here. Bruce Duvall, who we're always used to seeing, is the Assistant Director for VDOT's Hampton Roads projects. And he's been involved with Creek Road for at least 10 years and has presented updates to council several times, hence we've seen him a lot. We also have Samba Seka, who's going to be the newest member on the With Creek Road project. He's the Senior Project Manager and has been managing the With Creek Road project for about a year. And then we have Ian Johnson, who's the head of the Transportation Department and is Assistant Principal with Clark Nexon. And he has done the project design and overseen that for the last several years. So Bruce, without further ado, council is here. They're widespread. We're here and look forward to your letting us know where With Creek Road is going.
Thank you, sir, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council. Thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. Our objective tonight, I'm moving on to slide 3 for your handouts right now, is to request your concurrence to reduce the With Creek Road's project scope such that it will allow the transfer of those residual funds from that scope reduction from the Poquoson project to the Hampton project. There is a $7.87 million deficit on the Hampton project. We'll talk a little further about that moving on. So what we're going to do tonight, moving on to slide 4, talk a little bit about the project history, talk about how we got where we are today, what the scope reduction alternative is, what are the plan changes, and what are the next steps. If you look at slide 5, it shows the project history. What we have to remember is when this project was first programmed in the 6-year program, it was a 5-lane facility, 4 lanes with a common left turn lane. By the time the city of Poquoson got the momentum and got additional funding on the project to fully fund that project, one of the very first things they asked us back in 2010 was, let's reevaluate those traffic projections to make sure a 5-lane is truly warranted. So we did that study. That traffic study actually did support a 4-lane facility. It also required a traffic signal to be installed at the Carey's Chapel Road intersection. We took that 4-lane design to the public in the fall of 2013. That was a citizens information meeting. And it was relatively received well. Obviously, we went from a 5-lane footprint to a 4-lane footprint, so people were much more excited about lesser impacts. As we began advancing that project in the fall of 2014, we did some extensive subsurface geotechnical investigations that unfortunately found that the subsurface conditions of the soil in the causeway area was very, very poor, much more than expected, much more than what was originally expected. What that caused us to do was we were forced to bridge much more of the causeway than originally anticipated. So now we're dealing with a bridge that today is about 120 feet long. As part of this project right now, it's almost a 1,400 linear foot bridge. Bridging it was still the cheapest cost reduction effort. But what that did is it created a project deficit. $10 million more to build that bridge than what we had in allocations in the 6-year plan. So we had to look at ways to reduce the cost. How can we deliver this project, still retaining the key attributes of the project, but bring it in alignment with the 6-year plan? That's when we rolled into the spring of 2015. During the value engineering element, the 3-lane reversible concept was introduced. All right. Bruce, can I get you to hold up just a second? Yes, sir.
Is this mic working? Because it's cutting in and out.
When he turns his head,
okay,
you gotta speak directly into it. When you start looking at
Yeah, I definitely want the public to hear you, so if you
Understand.
don't mind.
I'll
Thanks.
look at you, Mayor, if you don't mind.
That's fine. I'm looking at the TV,
Okay.
so you don't just think I'm looking by you.
I'm fine. So We were, in the fall of 2014, we're faced with a $10 million cost increase, and we were looking at ways to try to find cost reduction measures. So that's where we roll into the spring of 2015, and we introduced the 3-lane reversible concept. What was nice about the 3-lane reversible concept is, once again, it reduced the footprint of the roadway from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. It still provided the accommodations for the traffic demand across the entire corridor, but it reduced construction cost and the right-of-way cost, such that we were able to revise the project scope and align it with the 6-year plan allocation. So therefore, we had a new project intent, which was a 3-lane reversible road, which is what we have today, is currently proposed, moving forward into design. As we took that project design to the public as part of a design public hearing, we got the community's concurrence on that, and we began moving forward towards September 2019 advertisement. But what happened in the spring and summer of 2019 is the department began to experience significantly higher bids than our engineer's estimate. If you roll over to the next page, I think it's 6, basically what we do here is we started to experience bids that were significantly higher than our engineer's estimate. And it wasn't just this region, it was the entire Commonwealth across the state. When we started comparing ourselves, the unit prices that were received on recent bid tabs, meaning from this summer, we began to realize we got a problem, because across the board, not just one contractor, but the contracting community was submitting higher unit prices. Therefore, it was negatively affecting our estimate, meaning it's causing it to go up. So we ended up, as a quality control measure, we, the department, we hired an independent company to come in who specializes in cost estimating. They actually take an approach, and they are very familiar with contractors, working with contractors. They actually, the way they build their estimate is they build the project. And so independently, they went off on their own, developed their own estimate, came back to us, and they confirmed our worst fear, that yes, we have another $10+ million potential increase in the estimate, simply because of the bidding climate that's out there today. So what we ended up doing is, once we had that affirmation, is we went ahead and delayed the September 2019 advertisement until we can figure out what our next steps would be. So looking at the next slide, what we commissioned our design team to do was, once again, how do we retain the key features of this project, but do so such that it matches the allocations. In this environment, it's very hard to find additional money, as we all know. So we looked at reducing scope options, and one of the very first things we did, again, just brainstorming exercises, is what if we were to eliminate the 3-lane reversible concept? Well, we ran into a couple problems when we started doing that. First of all, elimination of the reversible lane concept just was not feasible, particularly in the Hampton portion, because it's the Hampton portion between Carey's Chapel and Commander Shepherd that has the heaviest volume of traffic. So reducing or eliminating 3-lane reversible just was not a viable option. Also, even if we were able to eliminate it, which we couldn't, removing the ITS, the signal, the cabinets, the foundations, that was nowhere near enough money to fully fund the project. But something we did notice, if you go to the next slide, in looking at this, we did realize that we might have an option here. So we looked at the elimination of the reversible lane system in the Poquoson portion of the project. And it was able to survive and meet the build and future year traffic demands as a 2-lane facility. But the corridor as a whole, which is the Hampton portion, had to retain the 3-lane reversible component. Again, that's because the portion of the corridor between Commander Shepherd and Carey's Chapel Road is where the heaviest volume is, and where most of the turning movements are at Carey's Chapel Road. So we dove deeper into this option, started looking at it to see how viable it might be. And there were some positive attributes that did surface. In all the conversations with city staff, the informal requests that they were making to us as we were trying to figure out where to go and how to make this work was, you have to maintain the key elements of that project. We need to make sure that the causeway remains elevated, and we need to make sure we have pedestrian access and accommodations. So as we started looking deeper at this, we did all we can to retain those two things. But this slide talks about the other positive attributes that the scope reduction does. If we're able to reduce the three-lane reversible on the Poquoson side and retain the two-lane existing roadway, but still retain that three-lane reversible in Hampton, we meet the traffic demands for the build in the future years. We still maintain the operation capacity of the Carey's Chapel Road intersection, because this project, even in its reduced scope, still builds out, makes the improvements at Carey's Chapel, and installs a signal. We do propose sidewalks on both sides of the road, and I have a slide or two that we'll talk of and show that. Most importantly, we maintain the elevated bridge across the causeway. But a very big hurdle for us, and we did early investigations with this with FHWA, but we have their buy-in that even under the reduced concept that we're talking about, I'll say the reduced limits of the project, FHWA agrees that this project does meet the NEPA element, the environmental document element, the purpose and need, and most importantly, logical termini. So what I'm trying to say about that is FHWA, should council support this, FHWA is also in support of this scope reduction.
And that's an acronym, that Federal Highway.
I'm sorry, Federal Highway Administration. Yes,
Thank you.
sir.
All right.
So if you slip over to the next slide. One more slide. There you go. What we're just trying to illustrate here is what you're looking at is the intersection of Carey's Chapel Road and With Creek Road. On the left of your screen is where the bridge is starting. It's the Hampton that's out of the limits of the view. With Creek Road runs left and right. Carey's Chapel is north and south, up and down. What this is trying to show is what we would do was we would continue the three-lane section, the reversible component, up to Carey's Chapel Road, and then we would transition that three-lane typical section to match the existing two-lane section about 700 feet past the bridge. The orange lines are only shown orange so they would stand out. Those are the proposed sidewalks on both the east and the west side. Again, with this scenario, which is the scope reduction on the Poquoson side, it maintains the appropriate capacity and level of service for the build in future years. It stays within the right-of-way that was proposed for the project, and it also stays within the footprint of any impacts to wetlands. So basically, we have a much cleaner process to follow because we're not affecting those things. If you look at the next slide, one more slide. Okay. While we're working on that, the next slide is simply superimposed. Thank you, sir. It's simply showing the existing two-lane section of With Creek Road and showing the sidewalks on both the east and the west side of that, and that would continue to the end of what we now know as the current project. You can see in the typical section here on the bottom of your screen, we have the existing two-lane roadway, and then we have the sidewalks on the right and the left-hand side. So what does this mean, moving on to the next slide for the plan changes? So what it means is under the proposal we're putting forth for council's consideration tonight is that we would retain the proposed three-lane reversible system on the Hampton portion of the corridor. We would transition 3 lanes, that 3-lane section at Carey's Chapel, down to match the existing 2-lane roadway on With Creek Road. We would retain the rest of that two-lane roadway for the rest of that corridor in Poquoson. We would add an 8-foot sidewalk and a 5-foot sidewalk, 8 foot being on the east side, 5 foot being on the west side. And most importantly, I have to stress at this point, the reason why from a designer's perspective, we have a very good, viable option for consideration is because we have tried to retain the key attributes of the project. Again, keeping the causeway elevated and maintaining pedestrian access. None of us like to be in a situation where we have to reduce scope. But if we can reduce scope, keep a project alive and keep it moving forward while still retaining the original purpose and need, that's a good thing. That's the best you want to do if you're going to do that. So the next slide looks at our cost. On the left-hand side, you can see that we have broken out the Poquoson and the Hampton portion. Basically, this $55.4 million estimate on the left-hand side is the current estimate with a reduced concept. You can see the next column over, the allocations between the two projects total $53.5 million, which shows on the column to the right the deficit and the surplus by project. By reducing and eliminating that reversible lane concept in Poquoson and shortening the length of that, we're able to realize $5.9 million of additional money on the Poquoson portion of the project. You can see the Hampton portion has $7.9 million, 7.87 to be exact, of a deficit. So that's why we're talking to you tonight, is about potentially transferring the $5.9 million onto the Hampton portion of the project so that we can keep both these projects alive and moving forward towards construction. But that doesn't solve everything, because even with the $5.9 million transfer, there's still a $1.97 million deficit. But we've already talked with the City of Hampton and met with them. We've also talked with the HRTPO staff, and they are receptive to Hampton coming forward to request additional RSTP funds from what they call the RSTP reserve account. You might ask yourself, well, why are you only asking for $1.97 million in the RSTP reserve account? Why aren't you asking for more? And the question to that is, there is no more. They only have about $2 million in the reserve account. So in order to make this a viable option, we had to find a way to sort of make it fit. And the 5.9 transfer is the way we think we can make this work. So the next steps, next slide over. The next steps, ladies and gentlemen, would be that we secure council's concurrence on the reduced scope as presented tonight. That would also, you would also grant the approval of the $5.9 million transfer from the Poquoson UPC to the Hampton UPC. Hampton then would go to TTAC and TPO and request the $1.97 million of additional RSTP funds. And then VDOT, obviously, once we have that green light and have those funds in place, would proceed with updating the plans and the design. That would be about a 6-month process. Because there is a change of scope, potentially, if the council were to support it, we would intend to take this back to the public for a citizens information meeting. It is not a design hearing, it's a citizens information meeting. We just feel like it's the best thing to do and the right thing to do, because what we told them at one time has now potentially changed. So we would do this concurrently. As we're advancing to advertisement, we would also turn around, once we had the plans mature enough, and take that to a CIM and proceed towards advertisement. So that is all I have to present with you tonight, but I am certainly willing, with my staff behind me as well, to answer and entertain any questions that we might have.
Well, Bruce, you did a really good job bringing us a bunch of bad news, but I appreciate that. Look, I concur, and you've protected the key elements of the project from my perspective. I have a couple of high-level questions, and I'll just kind of open it up. So, one, I believe I saw that the stoplight was still intact at Carey's Chapel.
Yes, sir.
Right.
The improvements at Carey's Chapel will happen, and the signal will go in as originally designed.
And we'll also have a extra turn lane because you're widening out at that point.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then the sidewalks are important to us. Would they be put in the spot that if, say, a future council was to, and VDOT, was to need to do improvements on the Poquoson side, we wouldn't have to undo to redo? In other words, would they be in the spot to accommodate a third lane in the future at some point?
Right, very good question, but unfortunately, even if we were to place those exactly in the spot that were in the ultimate condition for design, they're going to be at a much lower elevation than what they would be in a future road widening project, so they would still have to be removed and replaced.
Yep.
So right now, we're proposing to put those in within the existing right-of-way for the project that's been acquired. and we're going to meander them to minimize impacts to the greatest extent. But unfortunately, sir, no. Even in the ultimate condition, they would have to be removed only because of an elevation change.
Okay. And then, last but not least, the utilities movement that's occurred.
Right.
I'm assuming that the old poles would still come out.
That is something that we would have to do some more research on.
Okay?
The poles that are left with the streetlights on them through that area were left because at that time, the project was advancing to construction, and it was the intention to leave the lighting in as long as we could.
Right.
With the belief that the contractor would remove those poles. Right now, under the proposed scope, at least further into Poquoson, those poles are no longer in conflict. So I'd have to do more research to find out whether those poles would stay or be removed.
Okay.
I believe, though, if it would be council's wish, we could leave those poles.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question, something we need to all ponder, because that is our entranceway,
Okay.
right? Okay, so you've just come across the road and it looks kind of like we're in construction.
Right.
So, I mean, it would be my personal preference, but not speaking for this council, that we not have two sets of poles side by side as we come into our city.
Understood.
Yeah.
And one thing I do want to mention, and I failed to bring out during, the last time I was before you, Mr. Mayor, you asked us to
About
do
the
all we
lights.
could. You asked us to do all we could to keep the street lighting and put them back in, because at one time they were here.
Right.
Under this proposal, we are intending to put street lighting back in to the system, into the roadway.
And that's the question. Are they on the new poles or on the old?
They are in a combination of the new poles and potentially a new pole here or there, but that's where we would divide with
Okay.
Virginia Power to have those existing poles removed.
If we can get a comeback on that, I would appreciate it. And that doesn't have to be in public session, just so the council will know. Randy, just one last administrative question. I guess it's not on the agenda this evening, so I'm assuming that based on where council goes after the, as we continue this work session, that this would come to a future or the next
Yes,
council agenda.
we included the resolution so that you'd have a chance to see it and the community would. It was our intention, unless otherwise instructed, to have this as an action item at your next meeting.
Okay. And does that support the timeline, Bruce, that you were talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you've already mentioned that Hampton is good with this, so, and I know DPO that at least had the discussion, so I feel like I think that's all I've got. All right, council, other questions that you have? And Jan, I'll get to you in just a second, since I know you're on the phone. Councilman Green.
When you say the existing 2 lanes, are you going to leave them alone, or are they going to be newly constructed 2 lanes?
They would be left alone, remaining as is. About 700 feet past the proposed bridge is where we would transition, and then we would leave the remaining portion of the roadway untouched. And that's driven from a cost perspective.
Yeah, well, that pavement's in pretty poor condition after all the utility relocation, so that's really not, that part I don't like.
Could you elaborate a little bit on how you see the merge from a 3-lane to 2-lane coming into town? How do you think that'll work, or what is it going to look like?
Sure. Ian, I'm going to let you handle that one if you don't mind. Sure. And actually, if it's possible to slip back a few slides, we do have that intersection of Carriage Chapel Road. That would be a good conversation point.
Welcome, Ian. I knew I wasn't going to let you just sit there. Yeah.
Good evening. So, yeah, it's slide 10. So we've basically got two scenarios. If you look at 10 in front of you, that's the plan showing the signal. In the morning, you'll have 2 lanes heading southbound through that intersection. Okay, so just on the north side or on the right-hand side of the sheet. On the right-hand side of the sheet, That's where traffic in the morning, you'll have 2 lanes heading southbound, okay? And you'll have 1 lane northbound. In the afternoon, you're going to have 2 lanes northbound on the bridge, but one of those lanes will turn left at Carey's Chapel. So only 1 lane will carry forward through the intersection in a northbound direction in the afternoon, 1 south, and that additional northbound lane on the bridge will turn left onto Carey's Chapel. So 2 lanes southbound through the intersection in the morning, 1 lane northbound through the intersection in the afternoon, with that additional middle lane making the left onto Carey's Chapel. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
I understand what you're saying. You got it? Yeah.
Councilman Hux, you got anything?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for Mr. Duval, please. With regard to the fact that this project has been in the planning stages for nearly 9 years, and we're yet to break ground on the actual road construction, how confident are we, if we approve these changes, is this version going to carry through to where we can actually set a date to start the project? Because I'm seeing right now, best case scenario from now, we're looking at 48 months before the project is completed.
Right.
So how confident are we that we can make this work and carry it through to fruition?
Well, we are confident in the fact that we do take into consideration the extended life of that 48 months. We build inflation into those factors which roll into the unit prices. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict what the bidding climate's going to be in 6 months. I can tell you that we've done some very hard work to make sure that this project is aligned as well as can be with the information we do have available to us, which is the most recent bid tabulations. Again, that has been reaffirmed and reaffirmed, I guess, by the independent estimate by a separate firm altogether that aligned with our same estimate. So that's the best answer I can give you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Duval. Of course, what I would like to avoid is a year from now, coming back with yet another redesign and another request for another change. Like the mayor alluded to, the utilities work has been underway for quite a while. The With Creek corridor is not particularly presentable from a visual standpoint. And I'm not interested in the taxpayers, i.e. our customers, having to put up with this any longer than is absolutely necessary.
Yes, sir. Understood.
Thank you.
All right, sir.
Councilman Canal?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I keep looking at this drawing, and I'm not a traffic engineer, so I'm asking you to help me understand it. On the Hampton side, well, I guess that's still our side, but on the left side of this intersection, there's an arrow in the middle lane that has traffic coming back into the city, but the way I look at it, I don't know where that traffic how that a car in that middle lane could come straight into the city. The way I look at this, the concept would be, it would just be the far right lane that would allow traffic to come back into Poquoson. Are those arrows in that middle lane not accurate on the right side of or?
I think, sir, you've noted a slight error in the drawing because the middle lane where the arrow is coming into Poquoson,
That wouldn't happen.
that one, in the afternoon, that's going to be a left turn.
Only a left.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that arrow is at the bottom one with traffic coming back into the city is inaccurate.
Yeah, so.
Okay,
Correct.
all right, I was just
Yeah.
looking at the arrows and they had, two creating head-on collisions every time the light turned green, so I didn't think that was accurate.
Well, it's also important to note that we will still have the overhead lane control signals, which
Right.
will identify for the approaching vehicles which lanes are allowable use and
Right.
which aren't.
And just one more question. I remember the last time you guys came and spoke to us, the right-hand turn, that essentially that that third lane from Carriage Chapel to turn onto the bridge was taken out, but that's obviously been put back in.
That is back in.
Okay, all right, that's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilman Southall?
Actually, the questions I had for you have already been asked, but I asked that in the process of continuing with these changes, that you make every effort to consider redoing those 2 lanes that come into Poquoson, because they are in rough shape from the utility work that's been going on. And we just resurfaced that in order to make it last long enough for this project. And that resurfacing has been torn up quite a bit, and now that will have to be redone after this project. So I ask that you can make every consideration to try to do something with those 2 lanes. And I'll ask you also to consider about the 2 poles in front of people's houses, okay? I have concern about that. We care about how our city looks when you come into it, okay? And I don't think that would be a pretty look. Okay?
Understood.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Councilwoman Andrews, you have any questions?
I concur with everything my fellow councilmen have mentioned. I did want to ask, is there any change? Will citizens still be able to walk and or bike all the way to NASA? I know that was in the plan before. Is any of that changing?
No, ma'am, that is staying the same. There'll still be pedestrian connectivity between Commander Shepard all the way into Poquoson and through the With Creek Road corridor.
Okay, great. Also, could you expand a little bit? I know eventually people will get used to this intersection and the going from 3 lanes to 2 lanes, vice versa. But could you expand a little bit on how that's going to be indicated for citizens when it first gets started? Because it'll be kind of confusing at the beginning, I think.
So your question is relative to how are the citizens going to be aware of how to, I guess I'll call it navigate the system. So what we'll have is, and this will be part of the citizen information meeting process that Bruce alluded to. This will be our last public meeting. We'll have information there for the citizenry that will help message or indicate to them how the system will be navigated, particularly with the revised design. It's going to be important as we approach Carey's Chapel heading through Poquoson to the south. We're still going to have, like I indicated earlier, overhead lane control signs, so we'll put together a plan as to how that's to be navigated. I think it'll be very clear. We'll have overhead lane control signs for each lane, which will, if it's closed down in the direction you're traveling, there'll be a red X, and that'll be the clear indication, don't enter that lane. Green X, or green arrow, sorry, indicates that you will travel into that lane. And we've studied this pretty well, and I'm very confident that we'll have a good, clean system. The key, though, is making sure that we communicate that to the public. Are there any specific questions that I may have missed relative?
Thank you.
Ms. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilman Canal.
Thank you. My mind is rambling a little. And this is just me personally, I'm not speaking on behalf of this council, and I'm not going to hit on the 2-pole problem anymore. But my mind tells me when I look at this, a possible cost-saving measure is maybe the reduction of the size of that 8-foot sidewalk to 5. I don't see I don't see why a 5-foot sidewalk wouldn't be adequate on both sides. That would save people a little bit of their yards and maybe provide you enough funding to allow those contractors to remove the unnecessary poles. I don't expect an answer from that, but just wanted to bring that up.
Okay, noted.
The only comment I have to that, sir, is that we're going to do what we can about removing those poles and still retaining the 5-foot and 8-foot sidewalk.
So last but not least, Bruce, if you can walk us through one last time, assuming, let's start the timeline next council meeting, right? We come in here and we say, all right, we've got the amendment here to do two things. One, to approve the concept, and two, to transfer the money to Hampton's part of the equation. What is the timeline from there to construction start?
We're probably looking at 10 to 11 months, because it takes us about 6 months to redesign and repackage, and about a 5-month process to put all the special provisions and contract language together to advertise. So 6 plus 5 to get to advertisement. And then we're looking at a 36-month duration on construction.
So, say that one more time, 11 months,
It will take us about 10 to 11 months.
10 to 11 months to get to bid approval
To advertisement of the bids, yes.
or advertisement of the bids.
Yes, sir.
And then, how long is the bidding process? I'm kind of trying to put some key
I understand.
stakeholders for the future councils to be able to mark this project. Is this moving or it's not?
This would, at a minimum, this would be a 2-month advertisement, bid letting.
Okay.
So we would be able to have award of the low bid within 3 months of advertisement. So that would put us at, a little over a year from now, we could be awarding a contract.
Okay. And then the bridge itself,
Yes, sir.
it seems to be the long pole. Is there a lot of prefabrication that has to be done before we would see on-site contractors working?
You want to take that? Because I want to remind the audience that we're leaving the existing causeway in place.
Right.
It's the new construction of the bridge.
Right, right.
So I'm going to pass that over to Ian.
That's
see
great.
if he can address that.
Mayor, the primary construction element on this project with the reduced scope alternative, even with the original project, is the bridge.
Mhm.
And we expect that the bridge work will probably be the first thing that the contractor gets going on. As far as lead items, the piles that the bridge is going to sit on, those are going to be precast, so they can get those out on site very quickly. And that'll be the first thing will be erecting the temporary construction trestle, so they have to build a temporary bridge to the, I guess I'll call it the west side of where the new bridge is going to go in, so they can operate their crane. They'll erect this temporary bridge, and then they'll start driving piles. I expect that they'll be able to start the bridge construction very quickly.
Okay.
And that the bridge the construction of the bridge itself will last. I haven't seen the latest schedules, but we can expect a good 1.5 years of bridge construction.
Agreed. Okay. All right, so Randy, if y'all can get staff to put those markers kind of on a key event chart, okay, as we come across this project, and update because I'm pretty sure that I'm hearing a consensus here that we're ready to see this on the next agenda and move forward. I just want to track it for whoever's going to be here when this finishes. Yes, Mr. Vice Mayor.
The 18-month bridge construction, that's concurrent with the 36-month total construction. So the whole thing is 36 months still, although about half of it would be bridge. Is that correct?
Correct, and I need to
Okay.
be careful when I put out specific, time periods, but the 36-month duration, you've got a lot of utility work that still needs to be done, water, sewer, storm drainage, so the bridge component itself I expect isn't going to take the entire 36 months. It's going to take less than that. But the total duration to get everything done, that's the 36 months.
Okay.
Just wanted to make sure that that was the understanding. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Anything else of council? Jana, any last nickels?
No?
More millions? Anything? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for coming. I know that was probably not a pleasant message to bring in, and I appreciate your hard work. Your presentation was very good. I really appreciate where you're heading. Just want to do it this time. Okay? All right. All right, we'll adjourn this work session. We'll be back in about 20 minutes. Thanks.